The storm outside had turned Maplewood Diner into a trembling little island in the dark. Rain slashing the windows so hard that Emily Carter kept glancing up every few seconds, afraid the glass would crack. She had been working since morning, running from table to table with aching feet, her apron soaked from earlier spills, her hair tied loosely because she didn't have time to fix it, and her mind full of worries she pretended not to have. Rent due in 3 days, her mother's medication bill increasing again, her electric bill threatening to cut power if she didn't pay soon. But she pushed all of that aside because surviving meant working without pause, without rest, without time to even breathe properly. Maplewood Diner was her entire world. Small, old, a little broken around the edges, but it was all she had. And even though the HOA hated the place, calling it a blemish on their perfect neighborhood, Emily worked there with a gentle heart, serving every customer with the same quiet kindness. That night the electric lights flickered from the storm, the neon open sign outside hanging crooked, the smell of soup and rain mixing in the air as the wind roared like a furious monster. Customers rushed inside dripping, shaking off water, complaining loudly about the weather, and Emily kept smiling despite the pain in her back. The bell above the door dinged again and again as people escaped the storm, but suddenly, everything became silent. The door creaked open so slowly that almost every head in the diner turned toward it, expecting another angry customer yelling about the rain. But instead, a tiny figure rolled inside, a small disabled girl in a wheelchair, drenched from head to toe, hair plastered to her forehead, coat soaked through, teeth chattering so hard Emily could hear it from across the room. The girl looked no older than 9 or 10. Her hands were ice blue from the cold, her lips trembling, and her eyes. Those eyes carried hunger, fear, and a loneliness so deep that Emily felt it like a punch to the chest. The entire diner went quiet. People stared but didn't move. Some looked confused. Some uncomfortable. Others turned away because stepping towards someone suffering meant responsibility, and responsibility was something people avoided. The girl looked around helplessly, wheels squeaking softly as she slowly pushed herself toward the counter. Emily couldn't move for a moment. Her heart squeezed painfully at the sight of this child who looked like she didn't belong in the storm or the darkness or in a place where adults pretended not to see her. Finally, the girl's tiny voice cracked through the silence in a soft, trembling whisper. "Is there any food for $5, please?" Her voice was so small, so weak, so scared that Emily felt tears instantly burn behind her eyes. $5. She wasn't asking for dessert. She wasn't asking for a full meal. She was asking if someone, anyone, would give her enough to survive the night. Emily moved before her brain could catch up. She almost ran to the kitchen, grabbing a bowl of hot soup, fresh bread, fries right from the fryer, and hot chocolate extra sweet just in case the girl liked it. She placed everything carefully in front of her, steam rising, warmth spreading. The girl stared at the food with wide, unbelieving eyes. But I don't. I only have. Emily shook her head gently. You don't have to pay. Eat, sweetheart. Please. The girl's chin trembled. She swallowed hard, trying not to cry. Thank you, she whispered, her hands shaking as she reached for the spoon. Emily knelt beside her, adjusting the blanket around her legs, noticing bruises on her small wrists. Not violent bruises, but the kind that came from life being harder than it should be on someone so young. Emily felt something twist inside her, a mix of sorrow and fierce protectiveness she didn't know she had. She didn't know that someone was standing outside watching everything through rain-stained windows, gripping a steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. A black luxury SUV was parked facing the diner, engine running, wipers moving back and forth across the windshield like frantic arms. Inside sat a man in a tailored suit, hair wet from the rain, hands shaking, not from cold, but from fear. His eyes were locked on his daughter, on the little girl who should have been safe, warm, protected, not alone in a storm asking strangers for $5 meals. He pressed his forehead against the steering wheel, fury boiling through him, fury at himself, at fate, at everything he had failed to control despite all his power and wealth. He whispered, "Lily, oh God, what have I done?" His breath fogged the windshield. He wiped it quickly. His eyes stayed fixed on the waitress kneeling beside his daughter, adjusting her wet jacket. placing napkins near her, checking her hands like a mother would. He saw something he hadn't seen in years. Kindness. Real kindness. The kind that didn't expect anything back. The kind that came from the soul. His throat tightened painfully. Outside the diner, the storm raged, but inside, Emily's gentle voice created a warm little world for his daughter. Lily's face softened, her fear slowly melting as she took her first sip of hot chocolate, her body relaxing as warmth spread through her. Emily smiled, brushing wet hair away from the girl's face, whispering, "You're safe here, okay? No storm can bother you now." The man outside clenched his teeth. Because that was his job, his role, his responsibility. And tonight, a stranger, a waitress with tired eyes and soaked sneakers, had done more for his daughter than all his money, all his bodyguards, all his doctors, all his expensive systems of security. She had fed her, sheltered her, comforted her, protected her. And he had failed her. A sudden lightning flash lit up the sky, and Emily saw a shadow standing outside by the SUV. A tall silhouette. Still. Watching. She froze for a moment, wondering who he was. Then the shadow moved. The diner's door swung open with the force of the storm. Cold air flooded inside. Everyone turned. The man stepped in, tall, powerful, suit clinging to his wet shoulders, eyes red, chest rising fast. Emily stood slowly, heart pounding. The girl turned. Her lips broke into a trembling smile. "Daddy." The man's knees almost buckled when he heard that. He rushed to her, falling beside her wheelchair, cupping her face with shaking hands, whispering, "Lily, sweetheart, I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm here now." He pulled her into a tight, desperate hug. Emily stepped back, realizing she had unknowingly taken care of the child of a man who looked like he owned half the city and half the world. He raised his head slowly and looked at Emily. Not like a billionaire, not like a powerful man, but like a father who had just seen someone save the most precious part of his life. His voice was raspy, soft, full of emotion he could barely control. "You fed my daughter." Emily nodded awkwardly. She was alone, cold. "I couldn't just stand and—" She didn't finish because the man's eyes suddenly filled with tears, real tears. He swallowed hard. "Thank you." Emily froze. He said it like gratitude was pain. Like he hadn't spoken that word in years. Like he couldn't believe someone had been kind to his daughter without wanting something in return. The customers whispered, confused. The millionaire, Ethan Marlowe, one of the richest men in the city, was kneeling on a diner floor because a waitress had shown his child compassion. His voice lowered. Softer. More broken. "You didn't charge her." Emily looked at Lily and smiled. "Some nights, you just help someone because they need it." Ethan closed his eyes, breath shaking. Because that sentence alone hit him harder than the storm. Harder than every failure. Harder than every regret eating him from the inside. And as the storm raged outside, Ethan Marlowe made a silent promise in that moment. A promise that would turn Emily's entire life upside down. He would repay her kindness in a way that would shake the entire neighborhood. And the HOA, who hated this diner, who judged her daily, who mocked her job, had no idea that tonight, everything was about to change. The diner felt strangely quiet after Ethan Marlowe entered, as if even the storm outside had paused to watch what would happen next, and Emily stood frozen with her order pad still in her hand, unsure whether she should step closer or disappear into the kitchen. But Ethan didn't look away from her, not even for a second, his sharp, exhausted eyes trying to understand how a stranger had shown more humanity toward his daughter than people in his own wealthy circles ever had. He took a shaky breath, still kneeling beside Lily, brushing rain from her cheeks, whispering, "Sweetheart, why were you outside? Where was your nanny? Why didn't anyone help you?" And Lily, her voice tiny and fragile, whispered, "She left me. When the storm started, she said she had to go home." And Emily felt her stomach twist because no child, especially one in a wheelchair, should ever be left alone in weather like this, especially not by someone paid to protect her. But before she could speak, the HOA president, who had been sitting in a booth with her perfect hair sprayed stiff and her fake designer purse clutched in her lap, stood up. dramatically, smoothing her blazer as if she were on a stage instead of inside a storm-battered diner, and said loudly enough for the whole place to hear, "Mr. Marlowe, I hope you aren't planning to make a big scene. This diner is already a problem in our community. People like her," she pointed her nose toward Emily, "aren't exactly the type we want influencing children." Emily's heart dropped. Humiliation spread through her chest like fire, her face flushing hot as several customers turned away awkwardly. But Ethan rose to his full height like a storm given human form, turning slowly toward the HOA woman, his eyes darkening with a controlled rage that made even grown men shift in their seats, and he said quietly, "People like her." The HOA woman smirked nervously, suddenly realizing he wasn't reacting the way she expected. "Why yes, I mean, she works here, in this tiny, run-down shop. It doesn't really match the image of our neighborhood." Ethan stepped toward her so slowly, so deliberately, that the air itself felt like it tightened around him, and he said, voice shaking with disgust, "She fed my daughter. She sheltered her. She showed her more love in 5 minutes than people in our perfect community have shown in years. And you call her a problem?" The president blinked rapidly, her throat bobbing in fear, but before she could respond, Ethan continued, "Let me tell you a secret." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more power than shouting. "People like you are the reason my daughter suffers. People like you judge everyone. People like you turned kindness into something embarrassing." The HOA president stuttered backward into her seat, face red, hands shaking, but Ethan didn't look at her again. Instead, he turned back to Emily, and something softened in his eyes. Something almost painful, something like regret mixed with admiration, as he said, "I thought the world had no kindness left. I was wrong." Emily swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Sir, I didn't do anything special. She was just hungry." Ethan shook his head slowly, as if trying to hold back emotion, whispering, "No, Emily. What you did is something the richest people in this city forget how to do." Lily tugged his sleeve gently, her small voice quivering. "Daddy, she helped me when everyone stared at me like I was weird." Emily knelt again beside the wheelchair, her voice soft, gentle, motherly. "You are not weird, sweetheart. You are brave. You came inside alone. You asked for help. That makes you the bravest girl here." Lily's eyes filled with tears, tiny, scared tears that hit Ethan's heart like knives, because she hadn't heard words like that in a long time. Not from teachers who pitied her. Not from strangers who stared at her. Not from nannies who treated her like a job. But from a tired waitress with worn-out shoes and a heart bigger than the entire neighborhood. Ethan felt something crack inside him, something he had been holding tight for years. Guilt, fear, loneliness, all mixing together until he finally exhaled shakily. "Emily," he said, voice heavy, "I need to ask you something important." Emily blinked, confused, nervous, unsure if she did something wrong. "Why yes, sir." Ethan looked at her tired hands that worked hard, hands that held warmth, hands that had fed his daughter without hesitation, and he whispered, "Why did you help her when no one else did?" Emily looked at Lily and then at the raindrops sliding down the window, her voice cracking as she answered, "Because I know what it feels like to be alone, to feel invisible. And I can't walk past anyone feeling like that, even if I have nothing myself." Ethan closed his eyes briefly, overwhelmed. Lily held Emily's fingers tightly, small and trusting, and for the first time in months, her shoulders stopped trembling. The storm outside crashed louder, but inside the diner, something else was happening. Something quiet, fragile, and powerful. A billionaire father, broken with guilt. A disabled child finding comfort in a stranger. A waitress holding the tiny spark of humanity that the world had crushed out of most people. And in that moment, Ethan Marlowe made another silent decision. A decision that would not just repay her kindness, but rewrite the entire future of everyone in that room. The diner was still humming with tension when the HOA president's fake smile returned as she tried to regain control of the moment, smoothing her blazer, flipping her hair, pretending she hadn't just been shut down by the richest man in the city. And she stepped forward again with a forced laugh, saying, "Mr. Marlowe, please. Understand, this diner brings a certain crowd. It's not safe for your daughter. Surely you can see that. But Ethan turned his head slowly, looking at her with a coldness that made her instantly regret opening her mouth, and he said quietly, "The only unsafe thing here is your attitude." And his words sliced through the room like lightning. The customers stared, shocked, while Emily felt heat rise in her cheeks, caught between humiliation and disbelief. The HOA woman tried to smile again, her voice shaky. "Well, we simply have standards." But Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping into something dangerous. "Your standards left my daughter alone in a storm. Your standards allowed her nanny to abandon her. Your standards make you step over people instead of helping them." The president swallowed hard, stepping back, her confidence wobbling as she tried to defend herself. "This diner is old, it's messy, it attracts." Ethan raised one hand sharply, silencing her in an instant, his jaw clenched, his entire face tense as he said, "The only thing this diner attracts is real people. Good people. People who have something you clearly lack." The humiliation burned her face red, but instead of backing down, she snapped, "I am the HOA president. You don't get to speak to me like, I can speak to you however I want." Ethan interrupted sharply, "Because my daughter could have died outside while you ate here comfortably doing nothing." The entire diner gasped. The president froze, speechless. And suddenly it wasn't just about Emily anymore. It was about what the whole HOA stood for. Fake rules, fake kindness, fake smiles. Emily felt Lily's small fingers tugging her sleeve gently, and the girl whispered, "Emily, do you think Daddy is mad at me?" Her voice was tiny, scared, breaking. Emily knelt down instantly, her heart melting as she brushed Lily's wet curls aside and whispered, "No, sweetheart. He's not mad at you. He's scared. He loves you so much." Lily's eyes shimmered. She whispered, "But why did my nanny leave me? Did I do something wrong?" Emily shook her head fast, swallowing a lump in her throat. "You did nothing wrong. Some people don't know how to care. But that's not your fault." Ethan turned at the sound of their voices, his expression softening from steel to sorrow as he knelt beside them, putting his arm around his daughter, whispering, "You did nothing wrong, Lily. Nothing. I should have protected you better. I failed you." Lily touched his cheek with her small hand, tears sliding down her face as she whispered, "But I found Emily, and she saved me." Those words shattered Ethan. Completely. His breath broke, his shoulders sagged, and he closed his eyes in pain, whispering, "Yes, she saved you." Emily looked away shyly, trying to hide how emotional she felt. But Ethan stood up slowly, turning back toward the HOA president with eyes that now held a terrifying calm. "You insulted the woman who saved my child," he said softly, which somehow sounded more threatening than shouting, "and you call yourself a leader." The president stumbled over her words. You were only thinking about yourself," he finished. She opened her mouth but nothing came out. She was trapped under his gaze. Ethan stepped even closer until she had no choice but to sit back down in her booth, gripping her purse like a life jacket. Then, without looking away from her, he said, "You owe her an apology." The entire diner went silent. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. The president blinked. "Excuse me." Ethan repeated slowly, "Apologize. To her." The president looked around helplessly, hoping someone would save her from this humiliation. But everyone stared back silently, waiting. She looked at Emily, jaw tight, hands shaking, then forced out a strained whisper, "I am sorry." Emily lowered her gaze, not because she believed the apology, but because she had never been apologized to by someone who treated her like dirt before. Ethan exhaled slowly, still angry, but calmer now. He walked back to Emily, his voice soft again, apologetic this time. "Emily, I'm sorry you had to hear all of that." Emily shook her head, wiping her hands on her apron nervously. "It's okay, sir. I'm used to it." That sentence hit Ethan harder than anything else that night. "Used to it?" he echoed, stunned. Emily shrugged softly. "People look down on waitresses. They assume we're nothing." Ethan stared at her like she had said something impossible. He looked at Lily, who trusted Emily instantly, then back at Emily, who gave kindness like it cost nothing, who had nothing yet gave everything. He whispered, "Emily, who told you that you were nothing?" Emily didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence explained everything. Years of being ignored, belittled, judged by customers, the HOA, the world. Ethan stepped closer, his voice trembling slightly. "You're not nothing. You're the only reason my daughter is safe right now." And then Lily reached out her hand and whispered, "Daddy, can Emily stay with us for a while? She makes me feel safe." Emily froze, her heart cracking open. Ethan swallowed hard, emotion flooding his eyes as he whispered, "Yes, sweetheart, she can." And in that moment, Emily's world, small, tired, worn out, shifted on its axis, because for the first time in her life, someone powerful didn't just notice her, he valued her. And for the first time in Ethan's life, someone without power had shown him what true humanity looked like. The storm finally slowed outside, but inside the diner the real storm was just beginning, because after Lily's trembling request that Emily stay, something shifted in the air. Something deep, something emotional, something that made Emily's breath catch as she looked from Lily's soft innocent eyes to Ethan's exhausted, heartbroken ones, and she whispered, "Sweetheart, your dad needs to take you somewhere warm and safe. I don't want to interfere." But Lily held tighter to her hand as if Emily were the last piece of safety she had found in the world, whispering, "Please don't go, please." And Ethan swallowed hard because he had not seen his daughter cling to anyone like that since her mother died. Not since their home became a place of quiet grief and medical machines. And he murmured, "Emily, if you can stay for a little while, just until she calms down, it would mean everything." And Emily nodded gently, her heart melting. She pulled a chair beside Lily's wheelchair, brushing damp hair from her forehead, warming her fingers with her own palms, whispering soft, comforting words that only children understand. And Ethan watched with a painful mixture of gratitude and regret because this stranger, this young waitress who the HOA mocked, was doing more for his child in 20 minutes than therapists, nannies, and expensive doctors had done in months. He sat down slowly across from them, elbows on the table, head in his hands as the weight of everything hit him. The lost nanny, the storm, the fear he felt when he couldn't find Lily. The sight of her soaked and cold asking for $5 food, images he knew would haunt him forever. Emily glanced at him, seeing not a billionaire, not a powerful man, but a father who was breaking quietly under the pressure of raising a disabled child alone. A father who had been trying but failing, a father who loved his daughter so much it scared him. Emily spoke softly, "Mr. Marlowe, she's okay now. She's warm. She's fed. You're here." And Ethan lifted his head, eyes red, voice thick, "I should have been here sooner." Lily pressed her little hand on his, whispering, "I was scared, but Emily was here. Emily made me not scared anymore." And Ethan's heart shattered once again because those words carried more truth than anyone in their rich community would ever understand. The HOA president, still humiliated but too nosy to leave, finally stood again and said sharply, "Mr. Marlowe, if your daughter needs safety, this diner is not the place. Our neighborhood has standards." But Ethan turned slowly, looking at her with an expression that made half the diner gasp because now he wasn't just angry. He was dangerous, and he said in a low, controlled voice, "You will not speak again." And the president froze like someone had turned her to stone. Ethan continued, voice even colder, "You don't know what safety is. You don't know what kindness is. This place," he gestured toward the diner, the peeling paint, the old tables, "has shown more heart tonight than your entire neighborhood in 10 years. The president stepped back, mouth opening and closing with no sound, her power evaporating under the weight of truth, while Emily sat quietly, trying not to show how deeply Ethan's words touched her because nobody ever defended her like this. Nobody ever stood against the HOA for her. Nobody ever saw her worth, until this moment. Lily suddenly tugged Emily's apron, whispering, "Daddy doesn't know how to take care of himself. He forgets to eat. He cries when he thinks I'm asleep." And Ethan looked away quickly, shame rising in his chest, but Emily softened, brushing Lily's cheek, whispering, "Your daddy is trying. He just needs help too." The words hit Ethan harder than any insult ever had because they were honest, gentle, compassionate, something he wasn't used to receiving. He finally spoke, his voice cracking slightly, "Emily, I know you're just a waitress. You don't owe us anything. But tonight you gave my daughter something real. Something she hasn't felt in a long time. Emily lowered her eyes, whispering, "Kindness shouldn't be rare, sir." And Ethan nodded slowly, like her words were rewriting something inside him. He took a deep breath, then said, "The nanny is fired." Immediately. "She left my daughter alone in a storm." Lily nodded softly, gripping Emily's hand even tighter. Ethan looked at Emily seriously, but with the softness of someone desperate and hopeful at the same time, and said, "Emily, I need your help." Emily blinked, confused. "Help? Me?" Ethan leaned in slightly, voice trembling with vulnerability he hadn't shown anyone. "My daughter trusts you. She feels safe with you. I've seen it with my own eyes. I have resources. I have staff. But none of them could do what you did today. I don't know how to ask this properly. But would you come with us tonight? Just for a while. Just until we get her settled." Emily's breath caught. The diner fell completely silent. Even the storm outside eased into a soft rain, as if the world itself was waiting for her answer. She looked at Lily, the trembling hands, the small smile, the fragile hope, and she saw a child who had spent too much of her life being abandoned by people who were supposed to care. Emily exhaled slowly, her voice soft but steady, "Yes, I'll come." Lily's face lit up, and Ethan closed his eyes in relief, whispering a soft, "Thank you," as if she had just saved him too. And just like that, the night shifted, 2 lives, broken in different ways, turning toward a girl who had nothing but gave everything, and toward a future none of them knew was already waiting as the storm softened to a quiet drizzle outside. Ethan gently lifted Lily from her wheelchair and held her close, wrapping his jacket around her small, shivering body while Emily pushed the chair beside him. And every step they took toward the door felt like a step into a future none of them could predict. Because the entire diner watched in stunned silence as a billionaire walked out, not with security guards or assistants, but with a waitress by his side, and it wasn't power or status or wealth that connected them, but the simple, fragile thread of kindness that had saved his daughter. The HOA president stood frozen, her face pale with embarrassment and something darker, fear, because she suddenly realized she had insulted the one person this powerful man was now openly valuing. Outside, the parking lot glowed with reflections of streetlights on wet pavement, rainwater running down the gutters like silver rivers, and Emily hesitated halfway, looking at Ethan nervously. "Sir, I don't want to make trouble. I'm nobody. The HOA already hates me." Ethan stopped and turned, his voice soft but firm. "Emily, you're not nobody." She looked down, unsure how to accept those words, but Lily lifted her head from her father's shoulder and whispered, "You're my hero." And Emily felt her chest tighten so deeply it took her breath away because no one, not a single person in her whole life, had ever called her that. Ethan opened the back door of his SUV and carefully placed Lily inside, buckling her in with gentle hands, brushing her wet curls away from her face, whispering, "You're safe now, sweetheart." Lily smiled sleepily, her eyes already closing. Then Ethan turned to Emily. "Please get in. You're part of this now." Emily shook her head slowly, her voice trembling. "Sir, I can't ride in your car. I'm just a waitress, and people will." Ethan stepped toward her, his voice soft but heavy with meaning. "Let them talk. I don't care about them. I care about my daughter. And she needs you." Emily froze. She wasn't used to being needed. She wasn't used to anyone choosing her. She took a shaky breath and got inside, heart pounding. And the moment she closed the door, the world outside felt like it stayed behind. The loneliness, the judgment, the HOA pressure, all replaced by the soft warmth of the heated car and the sound of Lily breathing peacefully. As Ethan drove, the wipers brushed away the last drops of rain, clearing the road ahead like fate clearing a new path. Emily held Lily's hand from the back seat while Ethan kept glancing into the mirror, watching them, his eyes full of 1,000 unsaid things. Guilt, gratitude, fear, relief, and something else, something gentle, something soft, something he hadn't felt since before his wife passed away. He whispered, almost to himself, "I failed her today." And Emily leaned forward slightly, her voice quiet but firm. "You didn't fail her. Bad people did. You came for her. You found her. You love her. That's what matters. Ethan swallowed deeply, gripping the steering wheel tighter, whispering, I try, but I don't know if I'm enough. Emily looked at him, really looked, and saw the truth. Behind the suit, behind the wealth, behind the power was just a man terrified of losing the only family he had left. She whispered, You're enough for her. But even strong people need help. Ethan met her eyes in the mirror, and something shifted in him. Something heavy lifting, something painful loosening. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was carrying the world alone. As they turned into Willow Heights, the gated, polished, perfect neighborhood ruled by the HOA, Emily felt a knot in her stomach. The houses were huge, glowing with warm lights. Cars worth more than her entire life lined the streets. Everything looked too clean, too controlled, too fake. She whispered, They don't want people like me here, and Ethan replied instantly, Then they'll have to get used to it. The guard at the gatehouse blinked in shock when he saw Emily in the car, stumbling over his words as he pressed the button to open the gate. The SUV rolled slowly along the smooth road, passing manicured lawns and identical houses, all of which felt colder than the storm outside. Ethan glanced back. Emily, my home is your home tonight. Lily wants you there. And that's enough for me. The words felt too big, too generous, too unreal, and Emily's heart beat so loud she thought they might hear it outside. When they arrived at Ethan's mansion, massive, shining, almost intimidating, Emily froze completely. She stepped out of the car, staring at the tall white pillars, the marble walkway, the giant windows glowing like a castle. Sir, I don't belong here, she whispered. Ethan stepped beside her, holding Lily carefully, and said softly, You belong anywhere kindness is needed. Emily lowered her eyes, overwhelmed, tears burning behind them. Inside, the staff rushed forward in panic seeing Lily soaked, but Ethan raised a hand sharply. Emily helped her. She comes first. Emily blinked in shock. The staff froze. They stared at her with respect, a kind she had never received before. As they tended to Lily, drying her hair, wrapping her in warm blankets, Lily kept reaching out for Emily, whispering, Stay close, don't go far. And Emily stayed, her hands gently rubbing the girl's cold arms, whispering comfort, her heart aching at how fragile yet brave this child was. Ethan watched from the doorway, arms crossed over his chest, face full of raw gratitude. So deep and so real he didn't know how to express it. Finally, when Lily fell asleep, her small fingers still wrapped around Emily's, Ethan stepped closer and whispered, Emily, tonight, you saved more than my daughter. She looked up softly. What do you mean? He swallowed, eyes shining. You saved me too. And just like that, Emily realized something she never expected. She hadn't just fed a hungry child. She had walked into a broken home and become its only light. Emily stood in the quiet hallway outside Lily's room, her heart racing as she watched Ethan pace back and forth like a man trying to hold together pieces of a life that had been breaking long before tonight. And she could see the exhaustion in his shoulders, years of carrying guilt, fear, responsibility, grief, and she whispered gently, She's sleeping peacefully now, you did everything right. But Ethan shook his head, his voice barely. A whisper, No, Emily. I didn't. I should have noticed sooner. I should have protected her better. I should have never let that nanny near her. And he ran a hand through his wet hair, frustration shaking through him, and Emily stepped slowly closer, speaking softly as if soothing a frightened child. Sir, no parent is perfect. Even the best ones make mistakes. What matters is that you came for her. You didn't stop searching. You didn't give up, and something in Ethan's eyes softened, like someone had finally lifted a weight off his chest. He leaned against the wall, letting out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped inside him for years, and whispered, Emily, you don't understand, ever since her mother died. I've been trying to be everything at once, her father, her mother, her strength, her comfort. But sometimes I look at her and I'm scared she sees right through me and knows I'm failing. And his voice broke in a way that made Emily's own throat tighten. She stepped closer and placed a gentle hand on his arm, feeling the tension trembling beneath his suit jacket, and said, Failing is giving up. You didn't give up. You're still fighting. That's what she sees. Ethan looked at her like he was seeing hope take human form, his voice trembling. But you walked into her life for 10 minutes and she trusted you more than she's trusted anyone in months. How? Why? Emily looked toward Lily's bedroom door, listening to the faint sound of her slow, even breathing, and whispered, "Because I don't see her disability. I see her heart. Kids know when someone sees them, really sees them." Ethan closed his eyes, emotion flooding him, and whispered, "Emily, I wish I had met you years ago." Emily looked away quickly, embarrassed, her cheeks warming, her voice shaky as she said, "Sir, I'm just a waitress. Nothing special." Ethan straightened instantly, turning to her with a seriousness she wasn't ready for, saying, "Don't say that. Don't you ever say that." His voice was deep, intense, carrying a weight that made Emily freeze. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Tonight, when my daughter was alone and terrified, when the world ignored her, you didn't. You're more special than anyone in that diner. More special than anyone in this neighborhood." Emily's eyes filled with tears she didn't want him to see. She tried to blink them away, but one slipped down her cheek, and Ethan's expression softened even more. This time not with sorrow, but something warmer, something protective, something almost tender. He reached slowly, respectfully, and wiped her tear with his thumb, whispering, "I'm sorry the world made you believe you were nothing." Emily's breath caught. She felt something inside her crack open. She had survived years of being unseen, years of being underestimated, years of being treated like she didn't matter. And here was a man who had everything: money, power, status, looking at her like she was the only person in the world who did. Silence filled the hallway, but it wasn't empty. It was full, heavy, electric. Then Ethan looked toward Lily's room and whispered, "She needs you, but I think I do too." Emily shook her head softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "Sir, don't depend on me. I don't know anything about your world." Ethan smiled for the first time that night, tired, broken, but real, and said, "Good. Because my world needs someone who's not like them." She exhaled, heart shaking. He took a small step back, suddenly vulnerable, and whispered, "Emily, I know this is sudden, but would you consider staying for a few days? Just until Lily feels safe again." Emily's chest tightened. She thought about her small apartment, her empty fridge, her mother's medical bills, her shifts at the diner, her constant struggle to survive. And then she thought about Lily's tiny hands gripping hers, the fear in her voice, the hope in her eyes, and she nodded slowly, whispering, "Yes, I'll stay." Ethan almost sagged in relief. "Thank you," he whispered, voice cracking again. "You don't know what this means to me." And for one long, quiet moment, they simply stood there, two broken people standing in a hallway too big for both of them, connected by a child who needed them both in different ways. Emily finally whispered, "Sir, I should check on her again," and Ethan nodded gently, stepping aside, his eyes following her with a warmth he couldn't hide even if he tried. As she slipped into Lily's room, Ethan stood alone in the hallway, looking at the door she had just walked through, and whispered to himself the words he didn't dare say out loud yet. Words filled with fear, gratitude, and something dangerously close to hope. "She saved my daughter, but she might be saving me too." Morning sunlight slowly poured into the mansion like warm gold, creeping across the marble floors and touching the walls that had been silent for years, and Ethan found himself awake before everyone else, standing in the hallway with a cup of untouched coffee, staring at Lily's bedroom door with a heart full of fear and hope twisted tightly together, because last night had changed something inside him, something deep, something he didn't know how to explain. But he knew he wasn't the same man who drove up to that diner in a storm, and when he heard soft footsteps behind him, he turned to see Emily walking out of Lily's room with sleepy eyes, messy hair, and the softest smile he had ever seen, holding Lily's blanket in her arms. She whispered, "She's still sleeping, but she's okay, really okay." And Ethan felt his breath shudder out of him as relief washed over him like a wave, stronger than any storm outside, and he whispered back, thank you for staying, for everything." But Emily shook her head, still waking up, saying, "I didn't do anything special. Any decent person would have helped her." And those words pierced Ethan because he knew the truth. Decent people had been watching in that diner and none of them moved except her. Emily walked slowly into the massive kitchen, shyly pouring herself a cup of tea like she didn't belong in a place so big, and Ethan leaned against the counter just to watch her move, noticing how she held the cup with careful hands, how she looked at the marble counter like she was afraid to touch it, how she stood too straight because she wasn't used to being comfortable. He realized painfully just how small her world had been, and how undeserved that was. Before he could speak again, Lily wheeled herself into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes, her small voice sleepy as she whispered, "Emily?" And Emily knelt instantly, opening her arms, and Lily rolled right into her hug, resting her head on Emily's shoulder as if she had known her for years instead of hours. Ethan watched, frozen, feeling something break open deeply inside him, because he had seen Lily scared, crying, flinching from strangers, avoiding touches. But now she clung to Emily like she was her safe place, her anchor, her comfort. Lily whispered, "Can Emily stay with us forever?" And the question hit Ethan so hard he almost dropped his cup, because part of him wanted to say yes instantly, loudly, desperately, in a way that scared him. Emily froze too, her cheeks warming, her eyes wide, whispering, "Sweetheart, your daddy needs help too. I can't just live here." But Lily looked up at her with eyes full of hope, whispering, "Please. I don't feel lonely when you're here." Something inside Ethan snapped, gentle but powerful, and he knelt beside them both, his voice shaking as he said, "Emily, I know last night was too much, too fast, too emotional, but I can't deny what I saw." And he looked at Lily, then at Emily, then back again, whispering, "She trusts you. She feels safe with you. I haven't seen her smile like this since her mother was alive." Emily swallowed hard, tears filling her eyes because she knew what that meant. She wasn't just a temporary comfort. She had become the missing heartbeat in this home. Ethan took a deep breath, his voice trembling slightly as he continued, "I need help, Emily. Not from trained nannies, not from people who see my daughter as a job, but from someone who sees her for who she is. And that someone is you." Emily sat back slowly, the weight of his words settling deep in her chest, making it hard to breathe. "Sir, I don't have qualifications. I don't know anything about rich neighborhoods or special care or—" Ethan gently placed a hand over hers, his voice soft but steady. "You have the one thing money cannot buy. Heart." She looked down, tears dripping silently, because no one had ever valued her heart before. Then Ethan said the words that changed everything, "Emily, I want to offer you a full-time position, not just as Lily's caregiver, but as part of our family. A salary, a home, financial help for your mother, everything you need. If you stay, I promise your life will never be the same." Emily froze completely. Her hands shook. Her throat locked. She couldn't speak. This was more than kindness. This was a miracle for a girl who had spent years surviving paycheck to paycheck, praying for one break, one chance, one moment of mercy. Lily tugged her sleeve again, whispering, "Please stay, we need you." And Emily broke, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "I don't know if I'm worthy of all this." Ethan shook his head immediately, his own voice cracking, "You're worthy of more than this. The world just never gave you what you deserved." Emily covered her face with her hands, crying silently as Lily hugged her tightly and Ethan placed a gentle hand on her back, whispering, "Let me change your life the way you changed ours." The moment felt holy, 3 broken hearts suddenly fitting together like they were meant to. And right there in the warm, sunlit kitchen of a mansion she never dreamed of entering, surrounded by the love of a child and the gratitude of a man who had everything but still felt empty, Emily whispered the words that sealed the future, "Yes, I'll stay." Lily gasped with happiness, hugging her so tightly the wheelchair shook, and Ethan closed his eyes, placing a hand over his heart as pure relief and gratitude washed over him. Because this wasn't just the start of a job. This was the start of a new family. A family built not on wealth, but on kindness. And as the morning light filled the room, warming their faces and softening their pain, Emily realized she hadn't just fed a hungry child. She had fed a home starving for love. And Ethan realized something even bigger. Emily had saved his daughter, but she had also saved him. Forever.